I help people make magic internet money by putting words together.
You've generated millions for people.
The unlock for me was you can have the same amount of income, if not more, alone. It was all about like being able to shift someone's belief, get them to see a transformation. You know, speaking to the heart, not the mind. A lot of people said like, make it so irresistible that they feel stupid saying no. I always said small promises are easy to keep and easier to buy into. So make your offer believable. Paint hell, paint heaven, the bridge is your offer. Here are the steps.
Rather than ask you to introduce yourself, I would ask you, when you get in a taxi, what are you telling that taxi driver what you do? Because you do way too many things to be able to say that.
I help people make magic internet money on the internet by putting words together.
Alrighty.
And they usually go, what? And then it rolls on from there.
Yeah, because there's so many ways you do what you do, and you've said this before, like you simplify complexity.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say that is the case because you got a lot of things going on. Could you just recap for everyone at home, like all the things you do right now? Because there's quite a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think of them as intersections. I hate to box myself into one thing, but there is, you know, offer creation, there's email funnels, there's writing on social media. There's business consulting holistically, looking at problems and tying things together. But it all is problem solving at a glance, I would say. And then in a previous life, it was a lot of coding, programming, web design, and all of that sort of stuff, which sort of feeds in to what I do. But I would call it marketing if we could, organically.
Exactly. There's so many elements. And I think a great way to introduce the topic at home, because what we're going to get into is, I guess, your approach to writing, which is quite unique, at least from someone who's worked with you. And the first question is, what is power writing?
It's interesting you say it, because when I taught myself how to write or did all of that, I came from an email marketing background where we did like e-commerce and all of that. But I never truly studied hooks and call to actions and all of that, like the copywriting fundamentals, if you like. So for me, it was all about like being able to shift someone's belief, get them to see a transformation, and do it through triggering a certain type of emotion. And it was partially based on a lot of research that you do before you even start writing to understand that avatar. So then power writing was like, you know, speaking to the heart, not the mind. If I was to put it simply, I think that's what it means to me. And then finding ways to get someone to take action, which, yes, of course, has elements of copywriting in it. But I'm never fussed about how it looks, how it performs in an impression or growth-centric way. I'm focused on, does that person pull the trigger? Or do they feel something?
Yeah, and you've generated millions for people. Like, of the amount of things you do, and for the types of people you do it, it's crazy the amount of volume you do as well. And working with you, like, you enjoy writing.
Yeah, I absolutely love it as a whole, as a craft of its own. I found a lot of joy, like through the years at the agency. You know, we used to write for like chocolate bars, and then the next thing was writing to a business consultant, and then Debenhams, and then whatever it was. So like shifting the hats and really understanding what the campaign was all about, the level of income that we were looking to produce. You know, you're writing 7 emails for someone who's going to generate 5K, and then someone who's going to generate like 1 million in the space of a month or two. So it was really nice to context switch and get immersed into all of that as a whole.
Yeah. So how I want to take this is, you're technically a solopreneur, and you help other solopreneurs. I'm one of them. And when people see the word solopreneur, they usually don't imagine £1 million a year or €1 million a year, but that's kind of where you're going. That's what you help people do. So I want to go back to when you first went solo, because a lot of people might be listening thinking, ooh, I want to try going solo, but that is too scary, not know where to start. So what was your experience? Like, how did you end up going solo?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think when we look at leverage as a whole, it was sort of like I did the agency. Well, first of all, I started as a web developer, freelance, did that, then was an employee, then always sort of saw myself running my own business. So then when I quit the 9 to 5 and ran the agency, scaled it to the 12 people that it was, I realized that I hit a cap when I was doing done for you work. And thinking of leverage, I was always as good as could be because I was just delivering work for people. So then naturally, as I became better and better at my craft, I got questions on how do you do it? So then I was like, okay, if you bolt on consulting or coaching, you can now teach someone what you've learned and no longer actually have to cap yourself at that level of income. Because whether it was web design or email marketing or whatever, I was always capped at my own capacity or the team's capacity. Whereas with coaching and consulting, it was actually being able to package that IP and give it to someone else with different means with packaging the offer. So what that allowed me to do is see the amount of leverage you could do in a digital world without having to scale the team. Because I was always somebody who didn't do well in teams.
Because you had a big team.
And I had a big team, but I hated being the manager. I hated being the CEO. I was more of like a
Why?
Creative. Because when we look at personality traits, I think, people are naturally either mechanics or creators, or there's different sort of variables. And, look at somebody like Alex Hormozy, for example. He's not the CEO of his business. Layla is truly the operator, whereas he's the creative. And I was trying to be someone I wasn't by putting on an operational hat when I was sort of somebody who wanted to write, to create, to produce. And I realized that on the second or third year as the team scaled, that my weakness was the inability to manage them or the frustration of they're not performing as good as me, or, trying to disassociate myself because they won't be the business owner. They are an employee. And then whenever I used to do things solo, they used to sort of perform at what I deemed was okay and what more so fulfilled me or gave me that purpose. But I think that the unlock for me was you can have the same amount of income, if not more, alone with the tools and the packaging of that offer, let's say. And I tried that as a side gig to my own business. So I sort of had my 9 to 5 being something I owned that scaled organically, tested the coaching and consulting. And as soon as that basically met the same level of income, doubled it, tripled it, quadrupled it, I was
wow, that's a lot of quadrupling. So you still didn't leave even when you tripled, for example?
No,
why
because
didn't you leave?
I think the agency as a whole was like my first baby. So there was a level of attachment there going like, you grew this, you scaled it. I couldn't let go of that safety net, which is what you also fear letting go when you have a 9 to 5. It was like, I couldn't believe that writing a few tweets online could sustain that level of income that was happening. And I had to sort of tell myself that what you're doing is tangible. There is a delivery mechanism. You're not just preaching things and then people pay you for that thing. And when I accepted that is when I started downscaling the agency. But I think it was a mixture of fear, uncertainty, doubt, and also the attachment of the seed that you once planted. And through that evolution of the self was accepting that what used to serve you now no longer serves you, and it can be let go, gone off, and accepting that you're going to leave money on the table as well.
Yeah. So if we talk to the solopreneur now, who's just maybe started, when you look back at your own journey and your students, what's the biggest mistake?
That's a good question. I think it's twofold. One of the biggest mistake was not pulling the trigger early, which was a mindset piece where I was stuck in something that didn't fulfill me for a period of time, when I could have been happier sooner by letting go and then actually believing in yourself more. But I didn't have conviction.
We say that now, but if someone's listening to this in that situation, is there a question they should ask themselves? Is there something they should do?
Yeah, I think for me, it was very logically minded, like to get conviction. Can I get a result that I used to get for myself or for the agency or for insert thing for somebody else? And then I gained that conviction by starting off for free.
Yeah, same here.
Like got somebody, showed them that I could do it, got the result. They paid me a tip and I said, thank you. Then I, added on a little bit more of a price tag. And then they said yes. I did it again. They said yes again. Then I upped the price. And slowly, like that was a period of like 6 to 8 months of, even with the experience I had, that now I'm sort of a newbie in this field and it's okay to start for free. Whereas some people are like, I've got the value, I've got this, I've got that, but you're fighting with your own mindset here. So do whatever it takes to build that conviction early and don't worry about the now money. Look at it longer term.
Someone mentioned this, I can't remember, but like the testimonial was going to be worth more than what you could have charged them.
Yeah.
So at the start, you are just looking for, yes, the testimonial, but like what that means is someone was very happy with the work you gave them. That tells you so much when you're then pitching to someone with a $ attached to it, because you come across better. You're selling like, this is how we did it for this person. And then I find you can then up the price and close a lot more.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the best unlocks was like the testimonial was the outcome, but it was actually documenting the process to get to that outcome.
Then you have something, you have a process.
Yeah, and just by sheer documentation of like, look, this is what I'm doing, this is what I did, this is what I learned. Somebody's looking at that going, oh, this guy knows sort of what he's doing. And then he knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
But I got a lot more out of the process of that free client because the person who's consuming it doesn't know whether this client is free or not. They're looking at the way that you think and how you document that. So I think that was a big win and not being scared of showing the behind the scenes. I used to always think like, oh, I need to show the final result. I need to get the result. But when I actually sort of just showed what I was doing instead of like just tell people things, people were drawn to the thing you did. Like, oh, here's how I set up an email funnel for this person. Or here's how I helped them set up the email funnel, or whatever it was. Then they were like, oh, he can do that thing. And that's the thing I want.
Yeah. Perfect. And it's also a lot easier to create that sort of stuff because you're not telling, you're just showing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's who was it that said be, do, show, have?
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, be, exist, do the thing that you're about to do, and then show people what you're doing and give them what you have.
I mean, you have your own version of this. Teach, share, show, invite.
Exactly.
I want to take this to LinkedIn content for people at home. Do you mind sharing that? Because I think it's a really powerful way of looking at content. I don't personally use it, but it's actually did use it for my launch, actually. Now I remember. Yeah, we did it together. Yeah, we did teach, show, share, invite for 2 weeks, and it gave me some good guardrails. So what is teach, share, show, invite, and why do we use it? Yeah,
so when I was sort of trying to reverse engineer what everyone was doing, there's a lot of good stuff out there, but I felt like if I named it and personified it my own way, it would make sense to me and then made sense to other people. But I broke it down into, how you have top, mid, and bottom funnel at the core. It's similar to that, but I said, when you do a teach post, you're teaching people knowledge that you have in your heads. Just teach them the thing, how to do X, how to do Y. When you're showing your unique mechanism, your model, or a screenshot of behind the scenes of how you do something. Think of a carpenter creating a table, show me how, or a guitarist playing guitar. He doesn't need to tell you they're good. He just needs to show you by picking it up and playing. So that's show content, which is my favorite one because you just demonstrate. Share content is hobbies and interests, beliefs, values, or your philosophy, unrelated or related to business, because that's what sort of builds the trust. And then invite content is basically a case study, a testimonial, a result with an invitation to get off the platform and into your inbox, your newsletter, your YouTube channel, from wherever you are, somewhere else.
Perfect. And where all this goes is the offer. And being in your community, I feel like that is kind of the biggest value I feel that people are getting. And I built my offer based with your advice, and it's what's been able to close me. All the clients I've had, I think it's still very hard. Like, offers inherently are just emotionally hard, like to create. So similar question as to before, like, what are people getting wrong when it comes to creating their first offer?
People overcomplicate what an offer is.
What is an offer?
An offer is an invitation into something that you sell, whether it's a product or a service. But where people go wrong is they'll give you like the Great Wall of China of features that this thing has, right? Like, I don't care how many coaching calls, how many messages, how many resources, that you have 400 videos in there and all of that, making it irresistible. A lot of people said, like, make it so irresistible that they feel stupid saying no. I always said small promises are easy to keep and easier to buy into. So make your offer believable. So instead of overcomplicating it, give someone like a pathway of a plan in 3 steps. Human mind works in mysterious ways. We like the rule of 3. Give them a start, a middle, and an end so they can sort of visualize that. Give them a price in that context. And then you've basically got a clear promise. I'm going to do something tangible for you. This is how we're going to get there, and here's the price. In very simple terms, I think simplicity will always outperform, and give more focus on the promise and the outcome instead of the features. Because when somebody starts to see themselves in that transformation, you remember we were talking about hell to heaven. Paint hell, paint heaven, the bridge is your offer. Here are the steps.
Yeah. And the way I've written my offer is very much like, here's what you're doing right now, here's what we're going to do, and here's what it's going to feel like. But that is communicated right at the top and then expanded on a little bit.
Yeah.
And then I think what ends up happening, which I didn't have, I only had 2 testimonials at the start, which were free, and I just had them at the bottom of the offer doc, but now I just pepper it in. So one thing I think, like, your first offer is not going to be your last offer, right? And I think a lot of people, like, I've seen it in your community, take months sometimes. Like, what do you think's holding them back from, like, just getting the offer and then just sending it to people?
I think generally people forget that an offer is dynamic, right? Like, that's
literally sometimes on a Google Doc.
Exactly. And that's why the Google Doc is linked and it's not a PDF.
Yes.
Because the spots will run out, the offer will change, or add something to it, and it evolves as you evolve. And where people get stuck is they think that's what I'm going to sell forever and that's what it is, when they should go from 0 to 1 and then worry about what 1 to 100 looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. The scalability of the offer, people worry about that, when if you worried about that, then you would have never got started. It's like, oh, I can never get 10 clients. It's like, okay, let's get 1. And then we keep going.
I think also, like, people find it harder to get people to the offer than it is to actually have the offer. Because at the core, you're selling 3 things. It's either health, wealth, or, relationships or whatever, to some extent.
Yes.
But what they hold back on is, like, how do I get all of these people to say yes? And then that fear of rejection and all of that plays a massive role. And that's why we see people spend like a year optimizing, like, just get it fucking out there, get a response, and then optimize.
I want to double down on this a little bit, this topic. So when you have the offer, you're doing teach, show, share, invite. Let's use LinkedIn as an example. And you have someone bite. When you're just starting out, you have options. You could send them the doc and get a yes or no. You could get on a call, then send the doc. What do you tell that person at the start? Like, what questions should they ask themselves in terms of how they present the offer?
Yeah, so, I mean, if you've got an inbound lead, for example, I would at the beginning get on a sales call if I'm a beginner, because I want to extract as much information and understand the pain points. Plus, it gives you that experience where a Google Doc is basically an amalgamation of all of the objections and things you experience put into text.
Yes.
If you're a beginner, I think the more experience you get with objection handling and all of that, there's something different about person to person when you're just getting started that you can then take and then evolve into an offer in text format, for example. But when you get an inbound lead, I believe that, again, it goes back to understanding their current situation. Before you even talk offer, ask them, how do you feel? What are you doing? What have you tried? What's worked? What hasn't? Where do you want to go? So then by this time, you've clarified their pain points and their desires. Mm-hmm. When you do pitch the offer, which is the bridge, they're now aligned with what you've had to say, or there's misalignment on the other side. So then for me, it was always understanding, was it a value perception thing? Like, do they not get the value? Or is it clearly a money thing? I don't have the money.
Yeah.
And it all comes down to these two core sort of objections.
And I think that's a very good point you mentioned. Like sometimes the price, yes, was high, but for two very different reasons. Mm. They never would have had the money, or they don't see the value.
Yeah.
And one of them means we're talking to the wrong person. One of them means then the value, I can communicate that better. Mm-hmm. They're very different problems.
Yeah.
And if you don't get them on the call, it's hard to get that right.
Yeah. And most times, you've seen it as well. When I ask some of the students, I'm like, when you get that objection, like sometimes I laugh at this now. I used to ask, like, is it that you physically have the money, you just need some time to wire it or help it make its way here, or you don't have it? And if they don't have it, then I know it's clearly not a value thing. They just, it's the wrong who's in the room. If they start excusing themselves in doing that, I'm like, okay, then it needs to work on the value piece. Mm-hmm. And then you sort of find that balance between all of that. But all that experience then, once it's in a Google Doc, which is essentially that experience in text, does exactly the same thing. Mm-hmm. And I think it plays with sophistication levels. Like if a complete newbie just models something that we teach, they're not going to understand why the format is formatted that way.
Yeah.
Whereas when you get that sort of call experience at the beginning, you actually face what it is. And some of the best results that students have gotten have been because they've extracted all that juice from those calls and those experiences and then moved on.
For sure. And I think coaching does that a lot, because when you're coaching someone, you get to see all the objections and challenges they face. One big one I had recently was like, I'm not ready for it now because I just don't have the time. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, I never told you how much time this would take. And then they tell me the assumption of how long it would take. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, that's not the case.
Exactly.
But I would have never known that if that person is not on the call, right? And I didn't know that was a fear they had, like, this would take too much time.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point because, we've talked about value and pricing in general, but it comes down to 5 things: time, identity, money, energy, and reputation, the timer. Mm. And that's what people object most of the time. But through that conversation, you're like, oh, okay, time's not a problem. Identity's not a problem. Money could be, energy, reputation. Mm. And then you know what to unpack at the end because you've sort of had that Q&A at the beginning.
Yeah. You mentioned the word energy there. I think that word lives next to Jacob Pegg's, at least in my brain. So how does energy work in your world? And I want to bring this to business, but also personal life. So what does the word energy mean for you, like in business?
Yeah, we could probably talk for 4 years. But I think energy to me is a form of transaction in any way, shape, or form.
Between people?
Between people, between entities, between things in general. But I think when you look at the production of energy, that creates momentum, or momentum contains a level of energy in it. And momentum is also transactional, if you think about it. So for me, there is the life side of it. Like, no matter how many strategies or tactics or things you're told, if you're energetically not there, it doesn't matter what the textbook says. So I've personally spent a lot of time shifting energy levels, whether spiritually or financially or whatever the inner work had to be to speak to that word. And then obviously freedom comes as a byproduct of financial freedom. But where was I going with this? I think energy as a whole is a massive topic that we can sort of break down at different levels.
I feel like when it comes to content, people, that sentence you said, they look at the tactics, they think, then I feel like something's missing. I don't know if energy is that, or like how do they bring
it's also that's good, because when we look at a content piece, for example,
let's go granular on
you might have a banger hook, a banger call to action or whatever, but your energy's off.
What is that?
And it's like, it doesn't matter how good I've written the post, if I don't feel it. And I know some people might look at this and go, it's a bit woo-woo, for example, but it's like, when you don't feel that, then it's not the content itself, it's the energy that you've put in to create that thing. It's the same way I always see this musically. Like, if you get B.B. King to play a blues note for you, the same note, and you get a random guitarist playing the same note, that is what I mean by energy, right? Like that blues note that's coming out of B.B. King is like, holy shit, oh my God, I feel it through my skin and bones.
Yeah.
Versus the other one that's just a note. And it's the same feeling with writing.
The word recency comes to mind. I feel like this is an element. Like when it's weird. When I know someone's wrote it yesterday, I feel it. Even if the words are all the same. Yeah. And he wrote, yesterday this happened. Let's say it happened 2 months ago. For some reason, I can feel that it was yesterday from the way they write it, right? And I wonder if that's a part of this. Like when it comes to writing something with content, if I want to make this practical, like how do we bring energy into content? I think recency is one, but you have something called the mind reader effect. Yeah. And power writing comes into it. So if we can just double click on this, like my content has no energy. How do I fix this? Where should I start?
If we talk about energy and recency, for example, that's a good start. Whenever I used to repurpose content from like a month or 2 or 3 ago, it just didn't have the same effect because, one, it was repurposed, but two, the incident happened 3 months ago. So the energy of the post in itself was gone. So when I look at recency in posts, I used to schedule all my posts out months in advance. Months even, yeah. I used to like love it and have all these systems and things. Nowadays, I write them like on the day or like 2-3 days later, before. Now, if you're a beginner, don't do that because I feel that when you can schedule your posts out, you get into a structure. And I think...
Yeah, when it comes to the strategy.
Yeah, it really helps to have a strategy and a structure and get into like understanding that. Obviously with practice, you get better at that. Like, but for me, like if something happened yesterday on a workshop or I discussed something and I post it today or tomorrow, because it was such a recent event, that insight is what I believe is energetically woven, because we have an overflow of information, which means there's so much info coming out, but insight is what is becoming a lot more premium in a sense, because it's coming from real time.
What's the difference of insight and information?
So information is anything that we can Google, right? Like how to cook a meal, how to make a cocktail, how to whatever. But you have the
grandma cake example. Could you share that? I love that one.
Yeah, so that's sort of a little bit different, I would say. But the insight, so if we bring the grandma example, I'll try to tie it. When someone gives value, it's like, here's this recipe and here's how to make cheesecake. Get this much flour, this many eggs, this much cheese, stir it up, blah, blah, blah. If you give me that recipe, I don't need you anymore. And I can Google that. Anyone can say that, whatever. But if I said, Harry and I went to grandma's and had such a lovely time and this happened, and I'm giving you the insight of that moment, and I tie it back to the cheesecake, people are naturally going to say, well, where's the recipe? Because you've given them the what that has happened, the insight of that memory, the energy surrounding it, but you haven't given them the recipe. So I always look at like the the recency is there's momentum in the events that you're doing and everything that you're doing. So when you put that online, it's so recent that people want to follow what you did, what happened, the findings. So you're just demonstrating and showing where you are today versus scheduling something that happened 8 months ago that is like the recipe, the how-to. So that's one thing. Then you said that the mind reader sort of effect is, and there's no right or wrong here. Like I don't think I want to downplay any of the teach type posts that show people the educational side of things. There's a lot of merit in that, in growth and, beginner days where you try to show the value. But the mind reader is more so getting into people's minds and allowing them to feel seen and heard. Like I've had offers where I would just get somebody to resonate and they were like, I don't care what you're selling.
Take my money.
Take my money because you see me. And that's sort of in the higher ticket world where you get someone to feel seen. You talk to them slightly differently at the sophistication level they're at. And once they feel seen, it's like they go, you're in my head. Stop reading my mind, which fundamentally has to do with psychographics, like emotions, feelings, and all of that sort of stuff. And the better you understand your avatar, the more you can mind read them, the closer you can showcase the experience they're having, the better it is. Like I was driving here this morning and on the radio, randomly as I was connecting my phone, this lady was like, there's lots of traffic. I know you're frustrated. You will get to your destination. Be happy. There's no point being pissed on the highway. And I was like, Jesus.
Thanks.
Thanks. You just read my mind.
Yeah.
So an analogy there to bring it together. And what was the other thing you said? We had recency, we had mind reader.
I think it comes back to the power writing as well. There's overlap, of course, but when I look at my best performing content, if I'm thinking to talk to other solopreneurs now, it's usually recent events, breaking them down, educational. But now that I think about it, a lot of my stuff is show. I actually don't do much teach. I think I do like 2 or 3 a month, now that I think about it. But then I'm still maxed out when there's people who only do teach and they aren't maxed out. And I think energy is a word there. Like, I don't know, maybe my energy level or my content is slightly higher. And I think this is a part of it. Like if you wanted to make it practical, like do stuff, talk about it, and then talk with the audience, not necessarily like to them. Like, oh, do this. He's like, no. I hear you. You're in traffic. Don't worry. Boom, 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 boom. Yeah, and I think like there's, at least for me, and it attracts a certain type of person. Like if I just show you how to get an inbound lead, how to step 1, 2, 3, that's cool and it is educational. But if I showed you how I got 4 inbound leads on my email list by doing this, like my way of what happened yesterday. Yeah. It has so much more value being like, oh, he used this tool and this thing and that thing to get there. Yeah. And you're just demonstrating something that you did to your audience that nobody else can replicate, theoretically speaking. Yeah. I think the wrapper is important. Like the message might be the same. If the wrapper is, oh, he's either looming, sharing a WhatsApp screenshot, sharing the step-by-step of what he did in a certain time frame. I did a recent post where I just outlined the 7 first days of a client when we did their DMs. And that post got 1,200 impressions, which is quite low relative to other content. I got 3 messages saying, what's the price? And I was like, well, because all I did was like, we did this. And I asked my brother Demetrius to give advice to his day one self. And I just shoved that there at the bottom. And I said, enjoy. Yeah. And then I didn't do any call to action. In the comments, I later said, DM me if you want to join the circle. Yeah. But like the content itself, not that. It's a bit educational, but I felt like it was more like, look, this is what happened. Hope this helps you. Yeah. I mean, you just sort of sparked the memory. One of my best-selling posts with 0 call to actions was I had a workshop called the 1 Hour Power Writer. Then 3 or 4 months later, I changed the name to Power Write Like a Mother Flower. And I thought that was cool. It's pretty cool. The sales, like I got something like 20 sales the first time and like 35 sales the second time, which normally should be inverted. Yeah. On launch, you get more. And I just wrote a post saying, I changed 1 word
on this product and I made, 15 or whatever more sales. And people were like, what the hell? Like I could have written a teach post like how to change one word in your blah, blah, blah. But the fact that I showed you what happened, people were DMing me saying, where do I buy this thing? Like whatever. Even though the post was written like 3 days after I closed the doors.
Wow.
And it really showed me that people are interested in what you do in general.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes it so much more real, I guess, because you've just gone through the thing.
Yeah. You've got an amazing way of turning people who are interested to clients. And I've not heard someone else talk about it the way you do. So you have the funnel, not lead to client, it's lead customer to client. Mm-hmm. What's the difference?
Yeah, so good question. When I started, or when anybody sells conventionally, they try to get lots of leads onto sales calls and turn them into clients. Super simple.
Means pretty logical.
Yeah. So that means, it takes a certain way of doing. I'm not saying it doesn't work, but when I decided...
That's the way I do it. I've never had a customer.
Yeah, which is amazing, and it works for so many people. But I sort of said I don't want to take sales calls after a certain point. So I was like, to get a lead to read a Google Doc of my offer that was high ticket and say yes, there was about maybe 1% of the audience who would say yes, who are in the fast lane.
Yep.
Ready, I've consumed, I'm in. And then 99% were in the slow lane or some middle lane. Now, what do I need to do to get the slow lane and the middle lane people to say yes? And to nurture them, yes. But if I could turn them into a once-off customer by buying something for $100 or $50 or $200, that now meant that out of my, 45,000 followers, I got the 1%, yes. But now I had 15% buying something small. So I built an email list where I had like 300 customers who bought this thing once. And then I would only talk to them and try to ascend them into the higher ticket thing. But because they already bought the thing, they were indoctrinated into my world. It was so much easier to have a conversation with a once-off customer and get them to become a client than it was to spend energy getting on sales calls and whatever all day. So by inserting leads to customers to clients, it sort of helped me, one, extract more revenue from an existing audience, because then I could create repeat customers who weren't yet clients, and then meet them almost binary, like yes, no. Now do you want the high ticket? No, back to the list until you want it, or you keep buying, or you remain a lead, but that's okay. But that model was interesting because then doubled down on digital products and in turn created more clients.
Very cool. And I went on along that journey. Now that I think about it, I was a recruiter, didn't have a job, wasn't a solopreneur, and I just wanted to get better at writing. And it's funny. I saw you were in Cyprus. I was like, all right, might as well. Literally, I was just like, person who writes about stuff that I want. He's in Cyprus as well. Cool. So I booked an hour call. Yeah. And then on that call, we then met up. And I knew you were going to pitch the Modern Maker, which was your high ticket program. And it was funny. On the day you came, it's like, what is this? And I was like, I just want to learn more. I was talking you through my plan and you were giving me advice. But then I was already sold half an hour into the first call because I just saw the way you were looking at things like, I just want more of this. But I wouldn't have been able to kind of make that upfront investment at the time without getting a little bit of sense of what it would be like to work with you. I think that's the key part. Like, what is it like to work with you? I think it ties back to what we said earlier. Like, the show content shows what it's like to work with you to an extent where you can get clients, but even more, it's like, money has been taken. Here's what it's like to work with me. Great. Now I feel mentally comfortable to keep going.
Yeah, and I think what you said there is cool because a lot of people told me last year why it was so cheap to have a call with me. It used to be like
I asked you.
$100. Like, why? This is valuable. This is whatever. But to me, it wasn't just a once-off call. It was, well, here's how we can work together after those 60 minutes. So I remember looking back, it was like 100 people bought a call in a year, of which about 30% of them then ascended.
Yeah. And they still get the value. That's the amazing part. But yeah, I mean, those are very cool numbers, actually. So 100 customers 30% became recurring clients.
Yeah.
These are crazy high. And this is paid people. They paid the privilege.
Yeah. Bit more than 100, but roundabout. Yeah.
I think what we've explained will make logical sense to people. Teach, show, share, invite. I'm sure they could go to your post and find out more details. And when it comes to the offer, they can start. But I feel like there's a mental blocker when it comes to monetizing an audience. And that can't be overcome with what we've said. So I want to tackle that. So when it comes to monetizing an audience, when you look at your students, because I think that's the most real example for people at home, at least the ones that seem to struggle, why do you think they seem to struggle and what do they need to think differently?
It could be struggle because my offer is not there yet. Okay. It could be because I don't have a content strategy. But if we assume that they have an offer and they have started posting, it's not like they're level one. A lot of people fear the ask. They're like, I'm so used to giving value, and growing my audience. And there's, again, no right or wrong. Some people have grown huge audiences and then monetized. Others have monetized as they've gone along. But I think there's like a mental blocker where you're like, I'm going to ask for something now and it's not going to perform as well. And what's going to happen there?
Someone's going to say no.
Someone's going to say no and all of that. And I think like one of the people that I read a book called Pocket Full of Dough by Chris Doe,
Cool.
Said you give 90% and you ask 10%. Start with that until you get comfortable. Like keep doing what you're doing just one day of the week. Make an ask. And it doesn't have to be monetary to begin with. It could just be subscribe or grab my lead magnet.
For me, it's like, let's chat to find out more.
Let's chat. Like it doesn't even have to be, I'm going to sell to you until you gain that confidence. And then you start asking more. And I think, yes, dopamine is lovely when your posts go up, but the dopamine you get when you see a transaction, I promise you, is better.
Yeah, Stripe notifications over LinkedIn notifications.
But it also comes to a lot of people saying, I don't have a case study yet, and what do I have to do? And that also blocks them from trusting that they're good enough to do something. So, I mean, people have said this time and time again, you are your own case study. And don't think that because this person's successful, you're not. Your own case study is where you are in the journey. Like, I remember looking back saying, here's how I grew from, how I got 100 followers. And that was what I was showing. Or here's how I got my first lead. And there was always somebody 2 steps behind you who was starting, who wanted what you just created.
And technically what you have could be perceived as higher value because you just did it. And you actually know what it feels like. Yeah. So I think that's another thing that people say. Like when I started, I mean, technically, why did I have a right to be a ghostwriter? I've never ghostwritten for someone. I've only ghostwritten and got paid for it. Yeah. I never did it for free. So why was someone trusting me? And the main reason was I had done it for myself.
Yeah.
And they're willing to give me a shot.
Yeah, you show that you've done this for yourself. I mean, you've had the proof and all of that. Now you're doing it for someone else. Obviously, at the beginning, what you had that some people may not have had is belief. Like, I'm at a level where I can sort of try this out. And if I fuck up, I'm going to be honest about it with the client.
Yeah, it's a very good point. I had a lot of privileges, to be honest. Like I had the sales background of recruitment. I had you in the corner, which doesn't hurt. And Lara, who's in the room, Matt Barker, who I've looked at their posts and I've gotten some kind of sense of what to do. But I feel like it comes back to a point we made earlier. Like you do not have to make the ask for money at the start. You can still do it in exchange for the testimonial. And you can even say, or tip.
Yeah, and I mean, if we come out of the LinkedIn bubble for a second and
Yeah.
look at monetization, people are knocking on doors every day to get a split commission.
And they
on
are
a
saying
sale.
no to their face. Telling
Saying
them
no to
F
their
off.
face, call after call after call, cold calls, whatever they are. Like, we come out of the LinkedIn bubble, you sell anyway. And when you're an employee, like, you are selling to some extent. Anyway, you might as well sell for your own thing. I think we have it easier when you look outside of the social media bubble, any other service. Whether you're going to run paid ads or send an email or pick up the phone or get a referral, you are selling at the core. And that's all there is to it. I mean, high level.
For sure. I want to talk to a bit of my journey now, maybe a little, not, I was about to say mini therapy session, but not necessarily. It's in the context of, I'm now a solopreneur. I have clients. They're happy with me. Now I have two options. Scale. But then I think that's always the hard part. It's like, I've done it. I know how to do it, but now I need to do it for more people. And then that's where stress comes in or what have you. And you've been through this the agency way, where you scaled the team. And then you've also now gone the solo way. For someone who only wants to stay solo, they've made that choice. How do they do that without falling into the trap of stress, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. It always has to do with what you want at the core. So the solopreneurs, when you say scale, is that make more money or free my time? Deciding what it is. Because some people might be okay making 5K a month or 10K a month and not getting in more work and scaling back their time. So then we insert digital products instead of services and stuff like that, versus somebody who wants to jump, I don't know, hypothetically from 5K to 15K a month without hiring. And then you're using automations, you're using a bit of strategy, and you're using, like, for example, what we've spoken about previously is the proximity offer.
What is that?
There's different levels that you can extract more from your customers and clients to add or bolt on to your revenue without affecting your workflow. So, for example, if I'm doing done for you ghostwriting to take you, for example, your journey was, man, I'm maxed out. What the hell do I do to do this and that? And we bolt on coaching.
Yeah.
You're happy. They're happy. You've built more leverage. Maybe you lost the done for you client, but you substituted them with 4 coaching clients. To the coaching clients, it's cheaper. To you, it's more leverage, and you're able to onboard more people by doing less. So you've now taken a done with you plug into your done for you work. Then what did we do? We went email list, and you're thinking of digital products and things that give you even more leverage, where obviously time is the sacrifice here, but it's not you having to onboard 15 ghostwriting clients. So you're making more money by doing less work and having more leverage.
When do you think you've hit your max? Because I feel like everyone in the room here, there's a few LinkedIn creators, hit their max. And when they look back, it's like, I took on too much. And then I had to go back down. How do we avoid that? Should we avoid that? Is that like a ritual that everyone has to go through, maybe?
It's a good question. I think depending on who you are, you know when you've hit that max because you start to somehow resent the work that you're doing. So for me, for example, my biggest flaw was I had no breaks. The sheer willpower of I'm going to fucking do this. I'm going to get out there. I can onboard more because I didn't define what the end was or the cap was. I just kept onboarding more people. So then that bled into the night. It bled into family time. It bled into whatever. So I'm like, what are you doing this for? The signals were all there, but I could onboard even more, hypothetically speaking. Yeah. So when it starts to bleed into your personal life, that is a very clear signal that you either need to stop or you need to fix something and optimize something. The other thing was that was my biggest flaw because I was scared of letting go. It was like, this is security to me. This is what I need. But sometimes you've got to let go. And to me, it was like, I had my fists clenched and hustle was the way to get there, but it didn't have to be that way. So I think when you reach a point where you start to resent it, and this, like, you can automate things, you can systemize things, you can only go that far until, again, it starts to bleed into your personal life and, your body will tell you. I think the best way to see it is more strategically saying, I want to make 100K in a year in my first year. Therefore, I need, this is my offer. It's $2,000. If it's $2,000, there's 12 months in a year. I need this many clients to get to that number. Therefore, I'm not going to onboard more rather than just winging it at the beginning, because then that gives you flexibility. And then when you get to that level of, I've hit it, I want more, I want whatever, then you're looking again strategically on what I can plug and what I can remove. Don't just naturally raise your price because for the sake of it, like give it a reason.
Yeah.
And then you sort of go down that path to figure it out. But I think listen to your body first.
Mm-hmm. Just thinking to wrap up now, if you think of young Jacob who didn't know this life was possible, what would you tell them? To put it that way, then, I was a musician for 15 years. I made $50 a night playing jazz. Wow.
In my car, getting gigs here and there. I never thought I would get to where I am today. But what Cyprus is like. Our ancestors were all like, you got to work hard, you got to do this, you got to do that. Like culturally, it was like ingrained in us that you have to follow this system. Accountant, lawyer, doctor. Exactly. And you need to be that. And if you're not, like I remember my grandparents telling me, are you going to be this, like the equivalent of a, what did they call it? Like a flute dude who like plays. The flute dude they make fun of in the old stories, right? Yeah. And I was like, that's what I want to do. But actually what helped me come out of it is a bit of reality distortion. Like, can I distort my reality? If this guy's a millionaire, why can I not be? Or if this guy's making billions, why can't I have a fraction of that? Why do I have to be here and do that? And I know this is, it was me starting to conceptualize that it's not just dreamy, it's like a figure of speech. What do I need to do to get to that number? And then reverse engineering it backwards made it feel alive and well and real. Mm. And then I was like, oh, okay, this is how I can get there. So then the reality distortion was more of the kick that I needed, and then using logic to reason the steps. But if I'm looking back at younger Jacob, I think I was more ballsy in my early 20s, and I would do all sorts of crazy shit. Use that same mentality to say yes more often at the beginning, and say as many yeses as you can. Push yourself until you get to the point where you can say no. And that is a great place to be. Great. That's a great way to end. Jacob, thank you very much. Thank you. What should people do if they want to learn more about you? You can find me on LinkedIn, Jacob Peggs, or on Instagram, MostMojo, or my email newsletter, which is swipemymojo.com. Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you.